trust me, anything you do, someone out there is out there right now making millions of dollars doing it worse. Okay? How to prepare comedy for late night television. This is an Arts Academy podcast, one-on-one session hosted by Dean Victor Varnado with today's student, Jon Reynolds.
Hey, what's up, Victor? So, one of my favorite things that I saw you post, I don't know where I saw you posted at, but you were given advice on filming for festival submissions. And you gave this a bit of advice where an issue that I saw a lot of people had is they would hire professional videographers to record their things.
Right.
And your advice was to use a cell phone. And the thing that was interesting about it for me is you have done other things. So you have access to all the equipment, but you settled on the cell phone being the best way to do it. How'd you come about that?
Yeah, well, now for people listening, what Jon is talking about is submitting to festivals or comedy festivals. You're in the stand-up comedy track is what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So comedians all the time, when they want to perform at festivals or they want to perform at venues that haven't seen them before, they'll have to usually make a self-tape, a tape of themselves or recording of themselves performing. The reason that I said that a phone is better than anything else it's several. I'll try to go through them. Reason number one, you get more than one shot. If you're paying people to record you, what's going to happen is that you're going to pay people maybe even on the low end, $100 to come out and record you well, but you don't want to you get one shot to perform and then your $100 is gone. If you use a cell phone, you can record yourself over and over again at many different sets, and then you can use the best of, and it costs you less than $100 to set yourself up to be able to record with your cell phone forever. And so reason number two is having a professional comedy recording or a professional group record you. People who are watching at festivals, they don't care. They don't care that you had a fantastic lighting and a camera with 13 stops of dynamic range filming you. They don't care at all. Are you funny? That's what they care about. Even if it's for a show, then if you're for a show that's recorded, then you're going to be recorded on that show. They've got their own cameras. They don't need you to provide them with a pristine broadcast quality tape. So you're wasting your money. And you're also making the chances of you getting a good recording on tape harder. I keep calling it tape. People don't use tape anymore, but I still say tape. Everybody says tape, but just getting a video recording. Your chances of getting a good video recording are less when you do it when you spend all your money on one shot rather than using your phone. And just to elaborate, using your phone is fine. Just use your phone, use a stand. Actually, I have one right here like this. This is a stand for a phone, and it's like a little tripod stand, selfie stick. It has a little thing here that you can stick your phone in. It folds up. You can put this in your back pocket and walk around with it, go from set to set, and then just record yourself performing over, several times a week or whatever you want to do until you get your perfect set. And I also suggested people, if you have the ability, to also record your audio separately. And one way is to walk around with another recorder and record audio from the board of wherever you're performing if they have a microphone. Some places already have it set up so they can just make you an audio recording, and then you can sync it up with your video, and then use your phone video to have recorded the laughs of the audience, and then use the board so that you're easy to understand. Because that's one of the major things about submitting a tape is that you're easy to understand. It doesn't matter if the video looks great. If the audio is good and they can hear the laughs from the audience, they can understand you clearly. That's what's most important. And so that's what I suggest. Also, you could also record yourself with a second recorder and have like a lavalier mic hooked up to your body. You could either have an actual lavalier mic hooked up to a personal recorder that you stick in your pocket. You could actually, if you have an old phone, you could use an old phone to record yourself, either by sticking the phone in your breast pocket if you've got one, and using the mic on the phone to record your voice close, so that it's also easily understandable, and you mix that with the other recording later. Or you could take a set of headphones, plug them into your old phone, and use the microphone and the headphones under your shirt, like near your mouth. And that's another way to record yourself with pretty good audio for cheap or free. And you can do it over and over again until you get your best set.
Yeah, man. Like, I was really happy to hear you say that, and especially to hear you elaborate on it. It was very helpful to a lot of comics down here in New Orleans. We started taking that advice, and people were getting into, festivals that they thought were well out of their range, and they realized it was, the issue wasn't their material or their performance. It was their ability to transmit that to these festival submissions. So thank you for that very much, man.
Oh, I'm so glad. It's funny. I often tell people stuff, and I rarely hear back like how it works out. I had no idea that happened down in New Orleans.
It helped a bunch of people out down here.
I'm so happy.
Another thing is, it's so like, one of the reasons, like, you have this like bit of authority on the matter, because the thing that struck me was that, at least from what I could see, like, you have access to things more powerful than a cell phone, more powerful than a pocket recorder. Like, I wanted to ask you about, like, you did something a few years back called the Awkward Comedy Show with Marina Franklin.
Oh yeah, Marina Franklin, Hannibal Buress, Eric Andre, Baron Vaughn.
Yeah. And so, like, I was like wondering, like, how did that like come about? Like, was this something you guys did on your own initially, that you guys initiated yourselves and then shopped it, or was this something that like was commissioned, so to speak?
This was actually based on the fact that, like, when I first came out in stand-up, I had a little bit of heat. And so I was like doing things one after another. And I did one of the Comedy Central shows where you get a short set. And then after that, I ended up doing Conan and Jimmy Kimmel Live. And then after that, Comedy Central said, "Hey, would you like to submit for a half hour?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'd like to submit for a half hour." I submitted, and they rejected me because they said that they didn't think that I was ready just yet. And I was like, and I felt that I was ready because I felt funnier than of course I felt funnier than they thought I was. But to prove my point, I basically made a special. So I went out and I watched a ton of specials. I looked at what made those specials look professional, and then I figured out how much it would cost to make my own special. I also made a special that I hadn't seen before, so I wanted to give it something that was unique. And so up until that point, I'd never seen something that's centered on like black comedians that were kind of like alt, like there was nothing like that at the time. And so I went and I basically just asked my friends who I was hanging out with at the time, and I included Hannibal Buress, Eric Andre, and Baron Vaughn. Funny thing is, back then, all of them would open for me, and so that's why in the show I'm the closer, because everybody else is like,
up and coming.
But I mean, I thought we were similar amounts of funny, but as far as like who had the most like going on at the time, like I had a lot going on, but then I also was the one who knew how to like make stuff, so I ended up producing the show. And then the thing that was most important was making it look professional. And then also I thought it was important to have Marina Franklin on as a host, because she was kind of like the liaison, because she's not really alt. She's pretty much a straightforward comic. And we're all like, every one of us is weird in our own way. Like, I mean, Hannibal is weird and Eric Andre is weird. Everybody's weird. And so we each have like our own weird thing that we're doing. And she's like more like straightforward, just like straight up, like awesome jokes. Mm-hmm. And so she was the bridge for the audience for us. And so that was the whole idea behind the special.
Wow, that's awesome. Like, so like one of the things that like I didn't know you guys were, I could have assumed that you guys were all friends before the special. So like that was a question I was going to ask, is like, how did you decide on which comics to roll with you on that?
Yeah, they're just all my friends.
but like so that's perfect, because I wanted to like, I remember I was watching this interview with maybe Keenan Ivory Wayans a few months ago. It was right when quarantine started, and he was like going through like his start and stand up in New York. And then he talks about like the people he started with, and it was like, you know, it was like Jerry Seinfeld, Robert Townsend. Everybody knows Robert Townsend, George Wallace, and Eddie Murphy. Like they were like the guys who they should like. There were shows that you could have went to where that was the lineup.
Oh yeah,
and it got me to thinking. Like whenever I think about like my favorite famous or successful stand-up comics, there are like 3 other comics who I also like who are also successful, and they all started together. And like, I don't really know if I have a question, but like the idea of good comics rolling in groups, like, you know, like your support network as far as other comics, like how did you decide that these were your guys?
I mean, to put it like a pimp, game recognized game. I mean, that's the truth. It's just like, you know, we were hanging together because we were all like funny. We're all like, you know, black comedians, and we were all like doing something that was atypical but still funny. And so we just recognized that in each other. And so that's why we hung together.
Did you guys meet in like New York, Chicago, somewhere else? Like were you guys, which scene were you guys all in together?
I believe we mostly met in New York because I was in New York a lot. I mean, I also lived in LA, but I believe we all met in New York, and then at the time, I think Hannibal, like he had crashed on my couch a couple of times. Like he was just like, you know, skirting around. He was coming in from Chicago, and yeah, New York I think was where we congregated, and then we were just like just hanging out, doing our thing.
Like, so had you like, yeah, how, like, did you see these guys perform, or had you heard of these guys? Had you heard of Miss Franklin? Like, or
oh yeah, Marina and I were friends as well. Marina and I were friends for a while. Like Marina and I actually started comedy together pretty much. Like we were in the same group when we started comedy. I've actually said this 1,000 times, which is not 1,000 times, but a few. Which is there's a lot of comics that I know that I hung with and that I started with, and they've gone on to be like much bigger names in comedy than I am, even though we started together, we hung together, we recognized each other, we're funny. And it really is because I cannot stand the grind. Like I hated the road, and I've been on the road. I've been on the road, and when Hannibal was coming up at one point, when he was becoming super popular, it was before the whole Bill Cosby thing. He had me open for him on the road, and I just don't like the road. I'm just not a big fan of the road. That definitely is part of like honing your skill and building your audience, like people who do the road. However, I don't think that's necessary anymore. I think that if you're smart, you can use the internet. And actually, for the past couple of years, that's what I've been doing. I've been trying to use the internet more instead of using the road. And it's actually been working. I actually figured out that, like, for instance, I can reach a lot more people. Spending 6 hours writing an excellent article or working on an excellent cartoon than I can reach a lot more people than I can like spending 6 hours on producing and performing in a local show, which is what a lot of people do. But when I realized that, oh, I could just take that time and produce a good podcast and produce some writing or make a video or whatever, and all those steps, like that has become what my road is now.
Man, that is. And so like I'm really interested, especially because you're bringing up like your cartoon career. It's like you have like 5 careers, but you've managed a way to find like synergy between them all and like mash them together. And like with the cartoon and specifically, like I can't draw, but like I always wonder, like, how do folks like you decide when you come up with a concept, you come up with a joke idea? How do you decide this is a cartoon, this is an article, this is for stand up, or like how do you decide that?
I personally don't. Sometimes there's a version, there may be a cartoon that's a version of a stand-up joke there, that is a version of a tweet, that is a version of a more full article. I mean, there are different ways to express things, so they are never exactly the same, but sometimes they bleed over. I mean, sometimes something specifically works as a cartoon. one of my cartoons that actually blew up on in the New Yorker was something that was just like very specifically a cartoon for the New Yorker, and so that's what worked about it. And so it really just depends. Like I think that there's no necessarily barrier between one discipline or another, as long as the message gets across. I don't see a barrier.
I like that because like you put so much thought, like, I think about like somebody like me, I put so much thought into like a stand-up joke, and it's like it's useful other places. Like it's and like the idea that you might come up with something that you write for the New Yorker, maybe not the New Yorker, but like a cartoon that you write that you don't sell, and you're like, oh, I like this. You put it out as a tweet, and you go, okay, I want to explore this more, and then you end up using it in other mediums. That idea, that's amazing, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes when I write a tweet and then it gets a lot of attention, sometimes I'll be like, oh, that's a good idea. Maybe I'll take that idea and expand it and develop it into a cartoon or something like that. I do that all the time. Like tweets, I just blast out several a day. And then so sometimes something catches on. And then I can go back to that and be like, oh, what's funny about this? What can I use from this to help spur something else?
Man. What is this? So like with the cartoons, do you ever have like, because like I assume that I assume you also draw for fun, like recreationally.
Oh, of course.
And so like, but
in fact, the cartoons I sell are also for fun.
But I was wondering, like, you ever like have like an image, and then the joke, instead of it starting with the idea, it starts with the image, where you draw.
Absolutely.
Man, that's.
Yeah, sometimes I'll just draw something that I think is funny, and then I'll come up with something, or maybe sometimes there's nothing to come up with. I have this one cartoon actually that when I originally thought of it, speaking of drawing, when I started trying to get in the New Yorker, I couldn't draw well enough to get into the New Yorker really, or at least express my ideas the way that I wanted to express them. So I started drawing. I started forcing myself to draw every day. And then eventually that led to me eventually getting to the New Yorker, because I was funny when I started, but I just wasn't expressing my ideas well enough. But there's one cartoon that I did that got rejected because it wasn't drawn well enough. It had no dialogue, but it was a cartoon where I just started up with a funny picture. It's basically a cartoon where it's in a pizza shop and you see there's a bunch of pizza dough stuck to the ceiling. You know how like they throw pizzas?
Mm-hmm.
And then all the chefs are looking up at the ceiling, but one of the chefs has just like huge muscles. So like he's the one who's throwing the pizzas on the ceiling. And so like, but I couldn't, there's a lot of stuff that needs to be communicated just through drawing in that picture, and I wasn't able to do it exactly right, but now I can, so I'm resubmitting that cartoon. So
wow. So like that's I was gonna ask, did you start with cartooning, acting, directing, or stand-up first? So I guess the cartooning came after the stand-up.
Absolutely. I've only been really cartooning professionally for like two and a half years.
Really. And you trained yourself up, and like that's like one of the things that's like I've only been doing stand-up for like 3 years, and that's one of like the great things about art. Like I never thought that I would have an artistic bone in my body, and then I started doing stand-up, and then maybe 6 months in, something clicked where it was like, oh, I actually care about this, and then I could like see the improvement, and then more stunningly, I could see the improvement in the people behind me. And I just think that that's amazing that you were able to take that level of discipline and bring it to cartooning.
Yeah. In fact, I actually don't think of it as, I feel like you have a wonderful way of phrasing it, like how you think about all this stuff. But I think about it in I'm not going to say a negative way, but I think about it in a way that really fuels me, and I think it could fuel you too. And here it is. Anything that you want to do, anything at all, like you want to be a great stand-up, you want to be a writer, you want to be a cartoonist, trust me, anything you do, someone out there is out there right now making millions of dollars doing it worse. Okay? That's happening right now. So that's when I decided, that's when I was just like, oh, I could just do what I want. I could just figure it out, because I'm sure, I mean, you know that's true. You've seen specials on TV that are just garbage. I mean, you like
I've
someone
never.
is out there. You know, oh, really? Someone's out there making lots of money doing whatever it is you're dreaming about worse.
That's so New York, man. That's such a New York. I'm looking at it from a New Orleans standpoint, where it's like, oh, everybody's great. We can all be great, and you're like, no, no, no. Some of these people are trash, and I can get this
No,
money.
but I'm saying the same thing. I'm saying we can all be great. We can all succeed.
Oh, okay, yeah.
There's no reason that you shouldn't be able to succeed because there are millionaires who are not as adept at whatever skill is that you have.
Wow. Wait. So, like, how did you prepare for? Well, one, how did you even get started on doing late night stuff? Like, like the Jimmy Kimmel stuff and the Conan stuff. Like, was it just somebody discovered you? Did you submit? Did you audition? Like, how did that even come about? Like a boss.
I submitted to I submitted to Jimmy Kimmel and Conan. I just basically asked around people who had been on it and be like, how do you submit? And then they said, well, you have to talk to this person. And I was like, okay, I'd find out how to talk to that person. And I would say, how do you submit? And if they wouldn't write back, it was like no skin off my nose to like write them again eventually, because if they don't write back and they don't say don't write me or whatever, I would just write them again politely, but I would just be like, hey, I wrote a couple of weeks ago, you didn't get back to me. I understand that everybody's busy. I wanted to write you again to follow up and ask you blah blah blah. And so I would just be concise, short, and then usually if I was polite, people would just answer me. Then I would send stuff in, and then once like 2 months after I sent something in, I got a call.
Dang.
And that's how I got started.
Wait. So like you get the call and like, are they like, we're going to try and have you on a month from now? We're going to try and have you on 6 months from now. Like how much time do you have between the call and the you in front of the camera?
It's different for every show. When I did Conan, I got the call and they had me on 3 weeks later.
3 weeks.
Yeah. With Jimmy Kimmel Live, I got the call with Jimmy Kimmel Live. I got the call and they had me on, I think like 3 months later, like 2 or 3 months later, just because they said, oh, you're good enough. And then I think at some point I was on their roster and then someone canceled and they were like, they went down people and it was my turn. And so they're like, hey man, it's your turn. I was like, awesome. And then, and then I think the Jimmy Kimmel was like I think I did that before I did Conan. I'm pretty sure. And so that was like one of the first big things that I'd done. And then, but before that, I had done Comedy Central, but I didn't consider that as big, even though the Comedy Central, I forgot what the show was called, but it was a show that was just like a lineup show where they had like 3 or 4 comics within a half an hour, and they would each do like 8 minutes. And so that show, when I did that show, that was pretty much just that was pretty much my start, my very first time.
So I that's great. You had been on TV before you did late night, so like it wasn't a complete mystery to you what was going to happen once you got there. But
I had no idea what was going to happen. I mean, I had been on TV before, but Comedy Central is very different than late night shows. Like it was, I mean, the only thing that was similar was I was holding a microphone and there was a camera pointed at me. Other than that, everything else was different.
So when you get this call and they tell you you're going to be on in 3 weeks.
Yep.
How did you prepare in those 3 weeks? Like, what did you do in those 3 weeks into the lead up?
And this is actually normal. What you do as a comedian is you just reach out to every show that you know and you say, hey, I'm going to do a spot. Can I run my set on your show? And then people start booking you on everything and you just run it and run it and run it and run it. And then when you're about a week out, usually the talent liaison for that show, if you're like a newer comic, they will come out to where you're performing and you'll run it in front of them. And then they'll say, do this, change that, take this out, blah, blah, blah. And then but then you run it, the new version for them, you run it and run it and run it and run it until finally you're ready to go on the show.
How many times do you think you ran that first late night act, I guess you'd say. How many times do you think you ran that in that 3 weeks? How many times do you think you performed that?
I mean, I'm sure I was doing it 3 times a night.
All right.
3 times like every night. And then as it got closer, I would do it like 4 or 5 times a night.
Man.
Like if possible.
That's
well, you just want to be sure. You know, like when you get on TV, you want to be sure that you're going to do it right.
I like that. And like, and then like now you're in this studio audience. You're at the late night venue, and it's so different. Like I imagine the people are way further away from you. Can you even hear the people laughing? Like how?
Oh, you can definitely hear them laughing. They're not that far away from you. They're really like 35 feet. Like those sets are actually very small. They're shot on wide angle lenses, so it looks like they're bigger than they are. But the audience is actually not that far from you.
All right, cool. I think that's all I had, man. Like you were anticipating a lot of these questions, and that was awesome, man.
Well, that's great. I'm just glad that I can answer any questions that you have. I mean, I hope you find something that's helpful. I mean, it seemed like a lot of the questions that you asked, you kind of like know your way around stand up already.
Well,
so I don't know if I was
very helpful to me. It wasn't necessarily just new information for me, but like especially the cartooning stuff. A lot of my friends are on a similar track where they're doing stand up, and now that things are closed down, they're looking for other avenues.
Right.
And some of them are pretty good at it. And I was like, oh, I'm talking to this guy. He's a professional cartoonist. And so I was like, oh, let me ask some questions for them, because like I think this is going to be available somewhere else later, right?
Yeah, it'll be available online. Like anybody can it's a podcast, so anybody can listen to it.
Well, and like now this is dope that you're doing this and you're like cataloging all this information you have, all this experience you have, you and Roxy. And like, how did you guys decide on doing this?
Well, it was just an idea that I had. And so I try to have, when I have an idea and I think that it's a good idea, and if it keeps bugging me, then I usually just start doing it. And I know that's a good idea to just have a place where we can share information.
I like it because eventually like you're recording it and you're putting it down, you're putting it on wax. And somebody who starts like a year from now, or somebody who starts 2 years from now, most of this stuff is going to be still relevant. It might not be as relevant as it was the day you recorded it, but it's still going to be relevant. And instead of people having to rebuild the wheel, they can just come to like Arts Academy and it's like, oh, let me just Google, let me just search and see what they say about this. Or,
absolutely. The things that aren't okay. The things that are relevant are the things that will always be relevant is how you work. The things that are the specific thing that you need to do, but the idea and the philosophy behind working, that'll always be relevant. Okay, sorry, you said you had one last question. I think we're about at time. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, performing colleges. Do you ever do anything like that?
Absolutely.
And so like most of your stuff, it seems like you could use on late night, like just in general. But did you find that you had to like change yourself a lot to do colleges and late night from what you were used to doing when you were just freewheeling with yourself by yourself?
Not all the time. Colleges will tell you what they want. Colleges will say we're a PG-13. That's the level we want to go to for this college. Or they'll say, hey, don't talk about Jesus here. Or they'll say we are, anything goes. Or they'll say we like it dirty. Like they'll tell you what they want. And so it just depends on the colleges that you go to.
Well, I got to know which college said we like it dirty. I need to know.
I mean, there's a lot of them. A lot of colleges are pretty much no holds barred, especially if they're graduate schools, because then everybody's over 21. So then it's just like, you do whatever it is you want to do.
So I went to Howard, and one of my most memorable moments in comedy is watching a room full of 19-year-olds boo Rudy Ray Moore for using the N-word. Can't use the N-word at Howard. And he did it a bunch. Didn't work out for him.
That's really funny. Yeah, that's awesome. But that was Rudy Ray Moore, though. What do you expect?
I don't know who booked him at Howard. I don't know how they thought it was going to work out.
That's really, really funny. Like, we're going to book Santa Claus, but he can't talk about Christmas.
You better not call anybody a hoe.
I just want to say, everybody out there who's listening to this, if you want to be on the show, ask whatever question you want. Just email us. We're at Alt Arts Academy on all social media. You can also look us up at artsacademypodcast.com. Jon, thank you so much for being part of the show. You're awesome. I'm Victor Varnado, and that is the end of the show.